Castlewood Country Club in Pleasanton, California, is described as an upper-middle-class community, a beautiful and affluent place to raise a family. The typical crimes in the area were minor, such as out-of-hand cocktail parties. Charlene and Ernest Scherer were described as adventurous and fond of travel. In March 2008, the family, including their daughter Catherine, her husband, and their 2 children, had planned a trip to Hawaii with Charlene and Ernest. However, Catherine had been unable to reach her mother for several days, calling her multiple times a day without success. She asked her brother if he had heard from their parents, but he hadn't either. Eventually, Catherine called the country club to check on their home. The scene at the Scherer home was horrific. Despite the community's affluence, a brutal crime had occurred. There was extensive blood spatter throughout the house, on the ceilings, walls, and doors, indicating a violent attack. Ernest and Charlene were found inside, still in their pajamas, and had been brutally murdered. Ernest was believed to be the first victim, having suffered multiple blunt force trauma wounds to the head. Charlene's injuries were even more severe, with 20 blunt force trauma injuries to her head, as well as cuts to her wrists, carotid arteries, and jugular vein. Ernest had fought so hard that his wedding ring had come off. Catherine was devastated by the news. She called her brother, telling him their parents were dead. She recalled him pausing and asking what they were going to do. It was clear that this was not a burglary or a robbery. Something else was at play. The narrator suggests that money, women, greed, lies, and deception, including poker, were involved. The brutality of the crime made it difficult to comprehend, highlighting the potential for violence within anyone. The Scherer family gathered on March 22, 2008, to say goodbye to Charlene and Ernest. Catherine described the experience as horrible, expressing her hope that no one else would ever have to endure such pain. She watched as her brother, Ernie, helped carry their father's casket, while his wife, Robin, offered support. Catherine, her son, and Ernie were all holding flowers and crying. Her son, who was young, didn't understand what was happening. Catherine vowed that he would one day know who his grandparents were. The details of her parents' deaths were particularly traumatic for Catherine. She was told that they had been bludgeoned to death, and then their throats and wrists were cut. Charlene's face was unrecognizable, which was especially difficult for Catherine to process. She recalled closing her eyes, crying, and wishing she could have taken her mother's suffering away. She struggled to understand how anyone could commit such a violent act. The murders shocked the quiet, upscale community of Castlewood Country Club. Homicide detectives meticulously investigated the home and surrounding area for clues. Before moving to Castlewood, Charlene and Ernest Scherer had raised their family in San Ramon, not far from San Francisco. They were described as passionate about traveling and instilled that love of travel in their children. The family took vacations to places like Big Sur and Yosemite. Catherine recalled her mother explaining that experiencing history firsthand was important to truly understand it. Charlene Scherer was a dedicated accounting professor for 31 years. A devoted mon, she instilled in her son and daughter a strong work ethic and ethical values, always pushing them to reach their full potential. She wasn't harsh or overly critical, but deeply desired their success. Her husband, Ernest Scherer, had built his fortune in real estate and later entered politics, serving on the San Ramon School Board in the late 1980s. However, Mayor Abram Wilson recalled that Ernest had a confrontational style that often rubbed people the wrong way. Many were uncomfortable around him, and he frequently found himself on the dissenting side of votes. His style eventually led to his ouster from the board, an event that left him with a grudge against his opponents for nearly 2 decades. In fact, just days before his death, Ernest was scheduled to meet with Mayor Wilson to reveal what he believed was corruption within the school board. Tragically, Ernest was found beaten to death. Mayor Wilson's immediate thought was that Ernest had ticked off the wrong person and was digging too deep. A chilling question arose. Did Ernest and Charlene know their attacker? Did they open the door and let that person in? Detective Scott Dudek of the Alama County Sheriff's Department, who spearheaded the investigation, believed they did. The grim discovery was made on March 14, 2008. Detective Dudek's team determined that the murders had occurred several days prior, with the last newspaper pickup being on March 7th. The last time Ernest and Charlene were seen alive was the night of March 7th, when they had dinner at the Castlewood Country Club restaurant around 6:30 p.m. A week later, their bodies were found in their pajamas. Their home appeared to have been disturbed, but in a staged manner. As Detective Dudek described it, it looked like a person had watched a television show to say, "Well, this is what a burglary is supposed to look like." The house wasn't truly ransacked. Items were merely displaced. There were no signs of forced entry. Adding to the mystery, despite Ernest being a known gambler who had recently won a significant sum of money, the supposed burglar hadn't taken it. $100 bills were sticking out of the jeans that you could see from 50 feet away. Investigators also found a peculiar clue: bloody footprints in the entryway, which Detective Mike Norton believed were intentionally left behind. All the footprints clearly showed the Nike swoosh logo. Prosecutor Michael Nieto believed that a professional killer wouldn't have left such obvious evidence unless it was a deliberate attempt to mislead the investigation. The investigation naturally turned to those closest to the victims. In this case, we looked at Catherine Scherer and Ernie Scherer. The police quickly ruled out Catherine Scherer as a suspect since she was at her home in Utah when the murders happened. During questioning at the Alama County Sheriff's Office, a detective told Catherine that her brother, Ernie, was the only person they couldn't eliminate. Investigators stated that they had ruled out close friends and political enemies, leaving Ernie as the primary focus. Ernie Scherer was a professional poker player. His sister couldn't believe he would kill their parents, saying it was ridiculous and he had nothing to gain. However, police believed he stood to inherit over $2 million from their estate. They also found it suspicious that Ernie was very interested in seeing his parents' will so soon after their deaths. Just 4 days after the bodies were found, Ernie agreed to be questioned by the police. The police told Ernie that the interview would either rule him out or rule him in as a suspect, so they could move on to other leads. During the interview, Ernie claimed he was asleep at his home in Brea, California, on the night of March 7th, when his parents were killed. He pointed out that the drive from his home to his parents' house was about 6.5 to 7 hours, making it seem unlikely he could have committed the crime and returned home. Ernie said he was alone that night because his wife, Robin, was visiting family. He offered his cell phone records and said police could track his movements via his cell phone and his car, a Camaro. The interrogating officer wanted Ernie to clear himself so they could focus on finding the actual killer. Ernie had been married to Robin for 9 years, and they had a 3-year-old son, Ernest. Robin had supported Ernie's decision to leave a business career to become a professional poker player. She described the lifestyle as a roller coaster, with extreme financial highs and lows. At the peak of his career, Ernie earned over $100,000 in a year and even played in the World Series of Poker. His father had loaned him $616 to buy his dream home, with monthly payments of $3,850. This loan caused tension between Ernie and his mother, Charlene, who disapproved of his poker playing and didn't think it would lead to anything good. Charlene was very critical of Ernie's career choice, comparing it to being a professional nose picker. Their relationship had deteriorated significantly after he became a professional poker player. Charlene's fears about Ernie's gambling proved to have some merit. Ernie and his wife had met at a craps table in Las Vegas. In 2016, the investigation brought out the cheating side of Ernie. Adrian Solomon, living in North Carolina, met Ernie Scherer during a business trip. She was drawn to him, noting his height and blue eyes. She also made sure to check if he was wearing a wedding ring, and he wasn't. Unbeknownst to Adrian, Ernie was married with a young son in California, and his wife, Robin, was unaware of his activities in Las Vegas. Adrian described how Ernie was treated at casinos. He was a high roller and received VIP treatment, including show tickets, restaurant meals, and others. He enjoyed the lavish lifestyle and being able to provide those things for Adrian. Ernie told Adrian that he was very well known in the poker world. The two discussed the possibility of marriage and even looked at engagement rings at Tiffany's. Ernie also spoke to Adrian's mother about marrying her. However, Adrian began to see a troubling side to Ernie. Over time, she noticed his bets increased dramatically, from around $50 to $75, initially to as much as $500. She also witnessed him routinely carrying large amounts of cash, between $5,000 and $10,000, and sometimes as much as $40,000 in chips. This risky and volatile lifestyle raised questions for the police, who wondered if it could have been a motive for murder. The police questioned Ernie directly, asking if he had any involvement in his parents' deaths, or if he had hired anyone to kill them. Ernie denied any involvement. Lacking solid evidence, investigators had to let Ernie go. Just a week later, a significant lead emerged. Investigators reviewing surveillance footage from the Castlewood Country Club found images of a red convertible with a black top entering the area at 8:27 p.m. on the night of the murders and leaving 4 hours later. The police wondered if this blurry image could be Ernie's red Camaro. With this new information, the police wanted to re-interview Ernie, but he had disappeared. He had told Robin, his wife, that he didn't know when she would see him again and that he would be in touch. Only 5 days after his initial police interview, Ernie left in his father's car, leaving the red Camaro behind. When police searched Ernie's Camaro, they discovered that he had taken steps to clean it thoroughly. He had paid $140 to have the car detailed, both inside and out, even following the car on foot during the cleaning. The police saw this as a very strange act, believing he was trying to sanitize the car and remove any potential evidence. Investigators then re-examined the crime scene photos, focusing on the bloody footprints. They concluded that the size 12 Nike shoe prints were a deliberate attempt to deceive them. The police learned that Ernie normally wore a size 10 shoe. The investigators believed that Ernie left the larger footprints to mislead them, thinking he could simply say he wore a smaller size if questioned. Another piece of evidence that troubled the police was a trail of bloody footprints leading from Charlene's body to Ernest's and then continuing to a linen closet. The police questioned why the attacker would go to a linen closet, suggesting that the person had specific knowledge of the house and its contents, someone like Ernie. The investigation intensified when Ernie's wife, Robin, provided a crucial piece of information. She recalled that after the murders, when the family was allowed inside the Scherer home, Ernie had led her directly to his father's closet, where he kept his decorative sword collection. Ernie had taken out one of the swords, removed its sheath, remarked on its beauty, and then placed it back, muttering about the missing second sword. Given that both his parents had been brutally slashed, this incident raised a red flag for Robin. She immediately suspected Ernie's involvement and contacted the police. Ernie became the primary suspect, but law enforcement lacked the solid forensic evidence needed for an arrest. Instead, they monitored him closely. Ernie made this easy by posting Craigslist adverts across the country, seeking women from Oregon to upstate New York. His advert described a 29-year-old man looking for someone who can carry on a conversation, who is equally up for fun, and enjoys a good bottle of wine. Investigators believed he had been involved with approximately 100 women over the years. During this time, Ernie met a woman in New Orleans during Jazz Fest. He introduced himself as Bill Franks and claimed to be a novelist, writing a story about a poker player on the run after his parents' murder. However, at a casino near Bourbon Street, he was called Mr. Scherer, revealing his true identity. Ernie explained that Bill Franks was just a pen name. The woman didn't find this particularly alarming. Later, Ernie barricaded his hotel room door with furniture and bungee cords, claiming it was for a quick getaway out the window. This bizarre behavior made the woman very uneasy. After Ernie left New Orleans, she Googled his name and discovered his true identity as a professional gambler and that his parents had been murdered a month and a half earlier. The more she researched, the more disturbed she became. Meanwhile, another woman, Pamela Nichols from Las Vegas, had been on 2 dates with Ernie when his parents were killed. He called her the day their bodies were found to cancel their dinner plans, claiming their house had been burglarized and his parents murdered. Detectives found it suspicious that Ernie was able to make this call and relay this information so soon after receiving such devastating news. Phone records also revealed that Ernie informed Pamela about the deaths before telling his own wife. These revelations about Ernie's secret life were shocking to his wife. She described him as having secret credit cards, P.O. boxes, and lovers. Feeling betrayed, she became determined to help the investigation. Investigators were still working to build a strong case against Ernie. 3 months into Ernie's cross-country travels, police received a tip that he was gambling in Las Vegas. A detective secretly placed a GPS tracker on his car. His sister, Catherine, feared for her safety, believing that if Ernie could murder their parents, he was capable of harming her and her family. She and her family went into hiding, living in constant fear. Ernie's movements and finances were being tracked, revealing a potential motive. He was running out of money. Investigators learned that he had gambling debts of nearly $90,000 and over $40,000 in credit card debt. Around the same time, in 2008, the real estate market was collapsing, and his parents had asked him to repay the loan they had given him. Ernie was under increasing financial pressure with no reliable income. The investigation also uncovered Ernie's attempt to buy a gun the day before the murders. He and an acquaintance, Billy Krause, visited a gun store in Pahrump, Nevada. The owner, Robert Brentlinger, found their behavior suspicious. Ernie was quiet, while Krause was overly energetic. As a Nevada resident, Krause could legally purchase a gun that day. When questioned, Ernie claimed he wanted the gun for self-protection. However, Brentlinger refused the sale when Krause revealed he was buying the gun for Ernie, an out-of-state resident, which was illegal. The failed gun purchase didn't stop Ernie. The police believe that the following day, he drove west from Las Vegas with the intention of killing his parents. They tracked his movements using gas receipts from a Chevron station in Primm, Nevada, and a McDonald's receipt where he spent $5 on hamburgers. Mysteriously, Ernie's cell phone signal was lost in the early afternoon of March 7, 2008. Ernie's phone was off as he drove along Interstate 15, which runs between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. It remained off for 17 hours, leading police to believe he turned it off to avoid being tracked to his parents' home in Pleasanton. Although his phone was off, a surveillance camera near his parents' house was recording. The police were able to piece together a timeline of the events. They believe Ernie arrived at his parents' home around 8 p.m. on March 7, 2008, and entered shortly after. Investigators believe he first confronted his mother on the lower level of the house. Charlene tried to run upstairs, but Ernie caught her at the top. Michael Nieto believes Ernie then attacked his father, inflicting 6 fatal blows with an unknown weapon, before grabbing a sword from a linen closet to continue the attack. The investigators described the crime as vicious and inhumane. At 12:42 a.m., police say Ernie's car was seen leaving the Castlewood Country Club. By the time Ernie's cell phone signal was restored, he was at his home in Brea, 390 miles away. Alameda County Sheriff's Department officers replicated the drive, leaving at the same time as the car in the surveillance video. They arrived in the vicinity of Ernie's home at 6:36 a.m., the exact minute his cell phone came back online. Investigators considered this synchronized timing to be very strong evidence, almost like a fingerprint. However, investigators wanted Ernie to admit that the car in the surveillance footage was his. Detectives asked Ernie's wife, Robin, to help. She agreed to have a recorded phone conversation with him. Robin had not spoken to Ernie for weeks since his disappearance. She tried to act normal during the call. She asked him where he was, and he said Northern California. He claimed he wasn't trying to hide. Robin then attempted to trick Ernie to get him to admit being at his parents' house, which he had denied. She told him that the police had a video that appeared to show his car and him, and asked if he was there. Ernie denied it, but Robin insisted that the video clearly showed his car. After a long pause, Ernie remained silent. Robin believed that the pause confirmed that it was indeed Ernie's car and that he was there. On February 23, 2009, nearly a year after the bodies were discovered, Ernie Scherer was arrested in Las Vegas for the murder of his parents. Despite the arrest, Ernie remained confident. In a jailhouse conversation, he told a friend that he would soon be free and would never have to worry about the case again. He boasted about being able to move on with his life. While awaiting trial, Ernie continued to be arrogant, even telling someone, "I want to be free by Christmas." Prosecutor Mike Neo acknowledged that the evidence against Ernie was circumstantial, as there were no eyewitnesses and no fingerprints. The car in the surveillance video also couldn't be definitively verified. The defense argued that foreign DNA found at the crime scene, mixed with the victim's blood, did not match Ernie's, suggesting it belonged to the real killer. However, the prosecution countered that the DNA could have belonged to anyone who had been in the house prior to the murders, including first responders. Prosecutor Neo then re-examined the crime scene photos and made a breakthrough discovery: a bloody piece of paper, which turned out to be a warranty card from a Nike Youth baseball bat. Neo realized that this was likely the murder weapon. The fact that a Youth baseball bat warranty card was found with the victim's blood in the home of two elderly people was very telling. Investigators then focused on Primm, Nevada, where Ernie had established part of his alibi using receipts from a McDonald's and a Chevron station. This led them to a nearby Nike outlet store. There, they found a record of a cash transaction on March 7, 2008 for 3 items: a Nike Youth baseball bat, a pair of size 12 Nike Tomahawk Impact shoes the same size as the bloody footprints at the crime scene, and a pair of youth soccer goalie gloves. The purchase of these items on the day of the murder was a significant coincidence that further implicated Ernie. As the investigator said, "One too many coincidences is not a coincidence." On January 4, 2011, the murder trial of Ernie Scherer began. Cameras were banned from the courtroom. The prosecution presented the surveillance video, Robin's recorded phone call where Ernie lied about his whereabouts, and, crucially, the bloody warranty card. Ernie decided to testify in his own defense, which the prosecutor attributed to his narcissistic personality. Ernie believed he could convince at least one juror of his innocence. Prosecutor Neo was particularly concerned about one female juror, with whom Ernie seemed to be flirting. After the juror left the courtroom, Ernie would reportedly laugh and suggest to Neo that he had won her over. As the jury deliberated, Robin and her son served as a reminder of what was at stake. Robin expressed her fear that Ernie would also hurt her and her son. After a 3-month trial, Ernie Scherer was found guilty of murdering his parents. Prosecutor Neo described the feeling as overwhelming, knowing that justice had been served. Robin was emotional and shaken upon hearing the verdict. She made sure to look at Ernie's reaction, noting that he initially hung his head, and when he looked up, he had the expression of someone who had been caught. Robin now faces the difficult task of explaining to her young son how his father murdered his grandparents. Her son has only vague memories of his father and remembers living with someone who had a red convertible. Catherine struggles to understand her brother's actions and the complete loss of her parents and, effectively, her entire family.